Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty leagues, PPR leagues, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
And welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss everything in the world of fantasy football. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And we're back to feed you guys your fantasy football needs. Well, we got to start with probably one of the biggest stories of the week. And it looks like that Marshawn Lynch has visited the Oakland Raiders facility, and he has told the Raiders he intends to unretire to play for his hometown team. But, of course, for that to happen, the Seahawks would have to either release Lynch or trade him because they do own the rights to Marshawn Lynch.
Right.
Yeah, because since he was still on a contract when he retired. So, we're just speculating here. And I think it's fair to talk about Marshawn Lynch's value if he happens to go to Oakland.
Yeah, I want him. That's the only place I want him to go outside of Seattle because, I mean, it's Oakland, it's Marshawn. It's going to be entertaining, right? And the fact that they're only there for so long, I think, helps them out, honestly. But he is someone who will totally embrace being in Oakland, even though they're going to be in Oakland for, 2 more years. You need to have someone to bring so that way the fans get hyped about it. He will absolutely get them hyped. And I just think right now with the whole thing, he's going there, isn't he? He has to at this point. There's been too much, smoke around this whole thing. We'll talk about it later, but with Richard Sherman, it keeps getting more and more. I think at some point they basically have to trade Marshawn to Oakland and basically, let him do whatever he's going to do in Oakland, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And, I just think it's way too perfect of a pairing for Marshawn Lynch and the Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
Marshawn Lynch is from Oakland. I think whenever I think of the Bay Area, or I should say in this case, the Yay area.
He's going to have so much fun in Oakland, man.
He is. And when I think of the Yay area, when I think of that, for some reason, I think of Marshawn Lynch. I don't know why, but I think of Oakland when I see him.
Mm-hmm.
And, Oakland has been one of those, they have a lot of proud people there, and Marshawn Lynch is no different. They have a lot of, they go through so much growing up, and Marshawn Lynch is no different. So I do think with the Raiders having a hometown guy, I think it's going to go so well for that team. They're going to sell a lot of merchandise with Marshawn Lynch on it. I think it's going to kind of, even though they're going to leave in 2 years, I think, the hype is real, man. The hype is real with Marshawn Lynch to Oakland. And if from a fantasy football perspective here.
So he's 31.
He is 31. And I talked about this on the football podcast yesterday. I like him in Oakland because it gives him potential to score a lot of touchdowns.
Right. Because I don't think – here's the thing. If he goes there, yeah, fine. In 2014, he had 1,300 yards and had 13 touchdowns. Cool. The year before that, in 2015, he had 417 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not the same. So with the other people they have there, Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington, he can be a guy that'll get you a lot of yards, but he doesn't have to be the guy, especially at 31 years old. Like, that's not going to help your cause, trying to be the number one back. But if you mix in time, I think he can do really well in Oakland. He can give them some type of spark. He can give the fans a reason to come to the Coliseum while it's still being played there. And with the team being so good, I like all the ways this breaks down, right? Is he going to be, fantasy football-wise, like the number one running back on your squad? No. But can he be a flex dude? Yeah, because all of a sudden now if he gets some of these touchdowns, then all of a sudden it becomes a lot more valuable. It becomes not the same thing, but sort of around the version of what Jerome Bettis was at the end of his career, where he would get like 5 yards a game but 2 touchdowns. Like, he could be that guy. He could be what LeGarrette Blount was with the Patriots. Get you the touchdowns, not necessarily the rushing yards that LeGarrette Blount got, but get the rushing touchdowns, because I dare you, even at 31 years old and being out of football for a year, I dare you to go and tackle Marshawn Lynch one-on-one. Have fun with that. See how well that goes for you. Seriously, that's not going to go. That's not going to go how you hope it's going to go. Like, you're going to be like, I got it. Bam. And then you're just on the ground like, I made a poor decision. I got the wind knocked out of me. Oh, there he goes. There's another touchdown. Okay, I'm just going to lay down here and curl up in a ball. Okay, go to sleep. Night-night.
Rest in peace.
Seriously, yeah.
Go Undertaker on him.
Seriously, rest in peace, Undertaker. Like, the whole Marshawn Lynch to Oakland thing is just, it's intriguing to me, because I can't imagine that dude at this point anywhere else. And like you said, by the time they actually move from Oakland to Las Vegas, he will have probably retired again. So it's not like he has to worry. It's not like he's like 25 years old and it's like, oh, but he's going to be in Vegas. Nope, he's going to get his time in Oakland, and then Felicia, he's going to be out of the league.
Yep, and I do think that's the perfect time. Like, this has to happen now.
It makes sense. It's fun.
It does,
it all
matches up. Not only that, the Raiders are a legit contender. Right. I said this over and over again. I think they're the best team in the AFC West.
Right.
I think they can win the division. And remember, this is they had the taste of playoffs now.
Right.
With this young team, so that's going to help a lot. As a fan, and if I'm drafting, right, and I see Marshawn Lynch there, I'm probably going to take him in the middle rounds as my flex guy. He will be a strong flex, because having him in Oakland, he can score a lot of touchdowns, because the Raiders offense have so many weapons already. You got Amari Cooper there,
right.
Michael Crabtree.
Right.
You got Jared Cook now at tight end. Even Derek Carr can score touchdowns with his legs. You got Marshawn Lynch from the 20-yard line and on. He can score at least double-digit touchdowns. He's not going to get a 1,000-yard season again. I don't think he can, because they got so much depth there. And I do think if he does end up in Oakland, I think the coaching staff is going to kind of not run him down. I don't see him getting being that 3-down back. He's probably going to do the first and second down runs. I think he can score a lot of touchdowns. He's not going to get that 1,000-yard season, but touchdowns, they're valuable in fantasy, and that's why I like this. I like this a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm totally about this. I totally think it's a good idea. I think it literally makes sense on so many levels. The fact that he's from Oakland, the fact that the Raiders need some exposure, the fact that, not to get the fans mad at him, because winning will help that, but also in the beginning, fans are going to be pissed off because the team's literally moving. It makes sense on so many levels, and even from a fantasy football perspective, it makes sense, because at his age, you can't legitimately ask him to be the number one running back. That part's not fair to him. That's not fair to the organization. So now you mix him in with 2 other guys who actually had decent years last year. Everything works. Everything's smooth. Everything looks like it actually could be something where it's beneficial to everybody. He gets out of Seattle, which apparently just everybody's mad at Seattle right now.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of chaos there.
Everybody's mad at Seattle right now. And, the only downfall, right, in this entire situation, right, is if basically Marshawn Lynch comes back and everyone's like, yeah, beast mode, Marshawn, and he comes back and he's just awful. Right, that's the only downfall I can see, is if he's just awful, right? If he comes out and he's just not even close to that same guy. But considering Marshawn was never one of those kind of juke you out of your shoes kind of guys, he could, but that was his thing was more running through you than running around you. Unless he just comes out and is just total, just poop. Unless he comes out and he's just the worst. I love this on so many levels, man, and I don't see a really good reason. A convincing reason why they wouldn't offer Seattle, a 5th, 6th round pick for Marshawn Lynch, maybe even a 7th round, but a conditional one to where it's if he gets 500 yards, you get this pick. If you get 1,000 yards, you get a 5th round pick. Unless if you do something like that, like I see no real reason why they can't do this and make it something that's beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, and, best case scenario, Marshawn Lynch gets double-digit touchdowns. Worst case, he's just really awful and is cut in October. And the hype will die.
Right.
So that's the only thing I can see. All right, well, we're going to take our first break, and when we get back, I guess we're going to continue talking about Seattle here.
Still Seattle a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to get into some Richard Sherman trade talks when we return to the Going to Meet Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to Going to Meet Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And, well, it looks like we're going to get into some little defensive talk here. And that is regarding Richard Sherman potentially being traded out of Seattle, and it looks like the Seahawks have initiated on trade talks, and we talked about this on the football show, which should be also available on iTunes as well, or any platform that you use. Anthony and I also discussed the fact that Richard Sherman might be involved in these trade talks too. So I think it's about 90% likely that Richard Sherman is not a Seattle Seahawk next year. And you know what? I would love for Seattle to make a trade involving Richard Sherman, Marshawn Lynch, to Oakland. I think that would be quite a blockbuster trade. Quite something.
I want so badly for that to happen for multiple reasons. There's a chaos theory involved in that, but I want to see Richard Sherman play on a contending team because I'd like to watch Richard Sherman. Him being in Oakland would be funny because of, well, his favorite player ever that he put the wrestling promo heel, Michael Crabtree situation is on there. And also the fact of I want Marshawn and Richard Sherman to be on the same team again because that would be the most lit team I have ever seen in my life, having both of them in Oakland. Oh, my God. It'll be just like, if they can somehow get Michael Bennett to come there too. Because he's the other one that basically does not care what you say or what you think about him. He's going to go at you. He's going to go straight at your neck every single time. Like, I would like to see him there too. But he looks like he's staying in Seattle. Fine. But you get those two together, it'll be great. And even the fact, okay, cool. Even for a fantasy football perspective, right? It would help out Oakland and it would hinder Seattle. Because think about this. He's in Seattle with the Legion of Boom, right? Or whatever's left of the Legion of Boom because Brandon Browner and Byron Maxwell have since left. But you get the situation where you get him in Seattle, or leaving Seattle. Now that defense isn't as good. Now you rely more on Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor, who aren't as good anymore because you don't have as many people backing them up. It's one thing if you have like five guys, you all can kind of rely on each other. But if there's only two of them left, now they have to have more responsibility. So that puts more responsibility on the defense in Seattle, which means they're not going to be as good, which means now the offense has to have more of a role, which means you have more stuff for Russell Wilson because they've slowly been trending more towards him ever since basically Marshawn Lynch left, or since Marshawn wasn't the same guy. They've been trying to make Russell Wilson more involved in the offense. So now all of a sudden, defense isn't as good. The offense tries harder. Russell Wilson throws more interceptions. Now all of a sudden, him being the guy that gets you a lot of touchdowns, that interceptions goes away, which means he's not as valuable of a quarterback now, which means the team isn't as good, which means they're not making the NFC Championship game as much anymore, which means they're less relevant, which means we're going to get mad at Russell Wilson now because now he's not the guy who's winning anymore. We're going to get more mad at Michael Bennett. Like, there's like a trickle-down effect to this whole thing, right, if Richard Sherman actually leaves. But the thing is, it looks like he wants to because there's a report out saying that, he's requesting a trade. Now, whether that happened or not, whatever. The fact is now there's been so much smoke to this. It went from, maybe maybe Richard Sherman gets traded to Pete Carroll coming out and saying, well, yeah, we thought about that, to where you're like, okay, I guess that's actually a thing. To the GM of the team basically saying, like, yeah, well, we talked about it, we kicked the tires, which, like, they never actually say. There's always situations of just like, I don't know where those reports came from. We haven't had any kind of talks like that. They always deny it. Seattle is basically just like, yeah, and what? Like, they seem to be a team that doesn't care about it, which is kind of insane. And now you get Richard Sherman, who's just like, okay, yeah, know what? I'm done. I want to go to a contender, which is a weird thing to say. I want to go to a contender because the team has literally contended for the last 5 years. Yeah, they didn't do as well this year, but at the same time, saying you want to go to a contender was kind of strange. Like, I don't think, like, for the last week we've been talking about it, like, do you think he gets traded? No, at least not this year. Maybe next year, not this year. Now, with him basically saying, like, trade me, I still don't think it's 100% guarantee that he gets traded, because the Seahawks can just basically be like, no, we're not trading you. We're keeping you on the roster. You're going to like it. It's going to be fine. And you can't really say anything about it. It's a whole, like, people when they hold out, you know, in the offseason. It's like, well, I'm going to hold out and they have to trade me. No, they don't. They just have to basically deal with you being mad the whole year. And they've been dealing with people being mad for a very long time. Like, teams do that all the time. So does this mean he gets traded? No. But does the percentage go higher? Yeah, man. Now it's looking kind of like you said, like a 90% chance he gets traded, but the 10% still stays out there of basically them only getting like a third-round pick for Richard Sherman and basically saying, like, yeah, that's not enough. And keeping him on the team and basically saying, like, well, you're on the team, so get used to it and, you know, try not to pout too hard this year.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we haven't really talked about is how this affects the opposing receivers against the Seattle Seahawks if it does happen. Let's just say Richard Sherman will not be there. Earl Thomas will probably be back on that team. They still got Cam Chancellor. They won't have their best cornerback that has been there for the past 6 years. It's going to kind of maybe skyrocket the value of the opposing receivers that they face each week, honestly. Because if you're not having that presence of Richard Sherman there, you might have to potentially see what opposing receivers do against the secondary. Mm-hmm. And if they happen to look really weak without Sherman there, I think whoever starts against the Seattle Seahawks defense might be kind of a start there.
Yeah, because
fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. Because we saw enough with Earl Thomas last year. Once he went down, the defense wasn't the same. And, you know, if Sherman's gone, I mean, Sherman has to matter in that whole thing, right? Because they've been doing well, basically, with Brendan Browner and Byron Maxwell both leaving. Like, they still stayed basically the Legion of Boom while they were gone. But if he leaves, now all of a sudden they start doing better. You know, it became a situation, I mean, not to that same degree, but remember we were always talking about whoever was playing the San Francisco 49ers at running back. It was like, oh, yeah, start that guy. It didn't matter who it was. Start him. And if all of a sudden Seattle's starting to give up these 100-yard receiving games every single week, then all of a sudden you kind of look at it after about 3 or 4 weeks. It's like, all right, man, it looks like we got to start these wide receivers are going. You know, it looks like we got to start, you know, looking at Larry Fitzgerald a little bit higher. You know, maybe now we need to start looking at
even Pierre Garçon could have more value now.
Right, exactly. Like, you start looking at all these people around the league who are playing the Seahawks, and I got to think the Seahawks defense is still going to be good next year, even without Richard Sherman, but you can't keep taking – you can't replicate what the Patriots do, which is basically getting rid of their good players and still remaining a good team. Like, that only happens if you have, like, the most well-run organization in the world. Like, the Spurs can do that stuff in the NBA where they basically, you know, only have one actual all-star in Kawhi Leonard, but they still win 60-plus games. The Patriots can get rid of players left and right and still win basically 10 to 12 games a year because of the Patriots. But that doesn't happen with every team. Like, the Seattle Seahawks just got good in the last 5 years. Like, they weren't good before that. They had a break in between the time when they had Matt Hasselbeck and the time they had Marshawn Lynch. Like, there was a lull in between that time period. And we might be looking back at that lull if they start slowly getting rid of these players. But I can see Richard Sherman basically forcing his way out. Like, could you see him basically getting more vocal about this? Not to the sense where he, like, does some TO stuff where he's in this driveway doing sit-ups.
Or yeah, campaigning to get out.
Right, like, not that, but, like, you know, he already went on First Take this month. Or maybe it was the end of last month. But either way, like, he's been on First Take recently. If he just goes back on there and basically they ask him about it, he's just like, well, I've enjoyed my time with the organization. I think it's a very good organization. I got a Super Bowl with them. I had a lot of fun with them. But I think at this point it's time for me to move on. I want to go somewhere to a contending team. I want to, basically get a new start with the organization. There's been some stuff that I haven't been a fan of, and I want to just, see how I can do somewhere else. Like some politically correct statement like that. Like I could totally see him going on some station and basically like venting his frustrations in that way.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of chaos to watch this play out. There's a few teams I can see Sherman end up. I can definitely see him end up in New Orleans if they happen to not get Malcolm Butler, or hey, they might get them both.
Right.
That'll be a big improvement that defense has ever had.
Yeah.
And Green Bay, they did sign Devon House in free agency this year, so I think that's a really good spot for him. And they are one of the worst pass defense last season. And Tennessee Titans, I would love if he ends up in Tennessee. They have added Logan Ryan and Jonathan Seiferin.
Mm-hmm.
This team they look like they're ready to contend in the AFC South, which is a pretty bad division. And, they're a couple players away from actually really contending for a division title and maybe the playoffs. And the Patriots, they're always going to be involved in this, even though they did say they're not interested. But we all know that they may be lying. There's a 50% chance. I like to see him in Oakland, actually. That's the team that I would want him to see. Regarding if that's likely or not, that remains to be seen, but that's my team, and if he doesn't end up in Oakland, I'd like to see him in Tennessee.
Yeah, I can see that. That would be a good situation. They're on the rise. Be a situation where he could be pushing them to the best team in that division. That's not saying a lot because that division stinks. But, that would, make them a contender to win the division because Houston's good, but they have literally no quarterback to show. And Andrew Luck is basically the only competent player on the Indianapolis Colts on offense. Well, no, T.Y. Hilton's pretty good too. But, that would be a situation with him where, I don't know if you're contending necessarily because you still got to worry about the Patriots because they're kind of always there. They're just like always a team that's just, never leaving. But, yeah, Titans, I like it. I think that'd be a good situation, a good spot for them. All
right, well, we're going to take our last break here, and when we return, we're going to discuss some of the big-name free agents and where we think they might end up. We will discuss that when we return to Going to Meet Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to Going to Meet Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. Well, there's a couple of big-name free agents still available. Most notably, at the quarterback position, there's Colin Kaepernick, Jay Cutler. Right. We can probably throw Robert Griffin III because since he does have a name. For running back position, we got Adrian Peterson, LeGarrette Blount. We got Onquan Bolden still available there. He says doesn't have a desire to join a team right away, but he is ready to play again. So, we have all these free agents still there, on the market. I can see most of these guys signing after the draft. I don't see them signing before the draft. I do think teams want to see where they're at. But we got two big names of quarterback position. That's Jake Cutler and Colin Kaepernick. I have said the past couple of days, I even said on the football show yesterday and on the football show earlier today, you guys can check those out to see what I think. I think Jake Cutler should end up with the Texans. And I think Colin Kaepernick could end up with the Jacksonville Jaguars as a backup to begin the year. And as I said to begin the year, because if he ends up in Jacksonville, he can potentially take over as a starter if Blake Bortles goes all matched up on us.
Right.
So, yeah. Those are some of the big names I think that could have an impact next year in fantasy. And I think if Colin Kaepernick does go to Jacksonville, and he does take over the starting quarterback job, I think he can actually have a legit impact. He has a really good receiver core there potentially. The Jaguars have been one of the teams, in most mock drafts, they will take Leonard Fournette as their running back. And, Lord knows that they need a running back because TJ Yeldon just hasn't get it done. So I like the potential of fantasy impact of Colin Kaepernick but going to Jacksonville. I don't know if it's going to happen, but in a dream scenario, that's what I want to see. For Jay Cutler, I think it gives the Texans a chance to get someone that can get the ball downfield, and they have really two good guys that can really go down the field. You got DeAndre Hopkins, who I think can still be a top 5 receiver in the game, and you got Will Fuller, who has had problems with drops, but he can really be a speed threat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with both of those. I think, it's a good situation, especially for Kaepernick. If he can somehow get back to being a starter, and kind of rejuvenate his career, words. And the problem is it's in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville historically has been not the best team if you want to kind of, get a second start on life in the football world. But I like both of those. I want to see – so we talked about Anquan Boldin, right? I want to see Anquan Boldin go to New Orleans simply because he's a guy that doesn't necessarily drop a lot of passes. Generally if you throw it in his general area, he will catch the ball. And Drew Brees is one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the history of the league. He was second in the league last year, oddly enough, to Sam Bradford as far as completion percentage goes. And I just think you put those two together, Bolden's not going to get a lot of yards, but still, whenever you throw it to him, he's going to catch the ball, and it gives Drew Brees someone, with sure hands because, yeah, he can pretty much make any wide receiver good. Check Marcus Colston, check Brandon Cooks, check whoever you really want to check.
Brandon Cooks is not on the team anymore.
I'm saying, neither is Marcus Colston. Uh-huh. But I'm saying, he's made these people better over the last decade, right? Marcus Colston's had 10,000 yards, and I don't think that dude made one Pro Bowl.
No.
Not one. I don't even know if he was good, but he got, all these yards from Drew Brees, and you give him Anquan Boldin, I think that helps out a lot. And also, you get, the running back situation with LeGarrette Blount. LeGarrette Blount, he is someone who's in, a weird spot because he had 18 touchdowns, which fantasy purpose-wise, phenomenal. 1,000 yards rushing, good. Not fantastic, but pretty good year. I would love to see him go to a team like Cincinnati because I think then you show up something like the offense with them because you get him, you get A.J. Green, you get Andy Dalton. You say, cool, offense, we're good with you. We get touchdowns for you. It's going to be good with that. Then you just focus on the defense after that. So I think for him going there, it would be a good spot for him. Also with Garrett Blount because you want to see him go to a team that can thrive, right? Because he just literally won a Super Bowl with the Patriots. You want to see him still be in contention, right? So maybe Cincinnati doesn't work for that. So you can look at some of the other teams in the NFL. Does he go to Dallas? No. You got a running back who's good over there. Does he go to Philadelphia? No. He's got a good team that goes over there. But you look at other teams in the NFL and not to go to a bad team. But what if, I just threw it out right now, he goes to Green Bay? Right? What if he goes to Green Bay, gets some stuff right there? What if he decides he wants to go to Detroit? Detroit seems to have a pretty good offense in general, and that division's always kind of in flux because although the Packers are really good, it took them a second to warm up last year. The Bears look like they stink, and the Vikings, maybe they're good, but they started off okay last year, and then they kind of fell off. Him going to Detroit would kind of I can't say words. Why can't I say words?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Stabilize that offense right there, and I think that would be a good situation for him as well. So I would like both Cincinnati and Detroit for him to basically get him the reps that he needs because I understand that Detroit also has the two running back system they had last year. One got hurt last year. The other wasn't as good. So at least with him, he would be the stabilizing guy that helps be the running back for Detroit.
Yeah, and, going back to Anquan Boldin there, I do like him with the Saints. He could potentially score a lot of touchdowns because last year with the Lions, he had a career low, 584 yards of receiving, and that's the lowest of his career. He did have 8 touchdowns, so I would like to see the potential of him and Drew Brees.
Right.
Adrian Peterson, he is set to visit the Saints. So, maybe we can see Anquan Bolden and AP with Drew Brees, people that are kind of like a little bit past their primes a little bit. Except for Drew Brees, I think he still has a lot of football left in him.
Yeah, he just threw for 5,000 yards.
I kind of like that because of Drew Brees. I kind of like those two in New Orleans. Like Garrett Blount, I can see him in Cincinnati. I can actually see him going back to Tampa Bay where he started his career. He can replace the guy who actually replaced him. The Garrett Blount, he started as the rookie, had a really great rookie year. Then Doug Martin replaced him, and he can potentially replace Doug Martin before he comes back from his 4-game suspension to begin the year. So there's a lot of speculation still left to do. We still don't have a clear picture of where some of these guys will end up, but hopefully we will know probably after the draft in around May or so.
Right.
All right, well, that's going to conclude the show for you guys today. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. You can catch the show on a variety of platforms, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and on YouTube. And don't forget about the GSMCpodcast.com website. Anthony and I do the football show. I do the baseball show. You guys can check those out. And, before we go, I wanted to talk about this little story with Anthony here. Anthony and I are huge wrestling fans,
Yes, we
WWE. And one of the biggest heels in the sport, well, if you don't know what a heel is, it's basically a villain in the sport. That's how they word it.
Right.
Well, The Miz, did you read this story, Anthony?
I saw it, yeah.
He almost ruined his honeymoon with Maurice, who is his wife, who's also in the WWE. He almost ruined his honeymoon to fantasy football. I guess they spent like 5 days. I forgot where they spent it at, but on the very first day, he spent the first day in the Bahamas drafting his fantasy football team.
That is some commitment to your fantasy football team.
I'm telling you right now, yeah, I had to drop this news because it is a fantasy football show. I'm saying because he was telling E! News that it's tough to find 12 people in the league, and trust me, it is. It's tough to find.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to tell that to the listeners out there who... That's
funny, man.
I just want to tell that to listeners who kind of who were in similar situations because, fantasy football can do this to relationships. I'm not going to lie.
It can be a league situation where sometimes you get competitive with people and you're like, oh, I'm going to do it right now. No, you're not. We're going on date night. You're not. You're not. You're going to stay right here. You're not going to do your fantasy football. Yeah, no, that'll happen sometimes, man.
I just wish Maurice would have been delete to the fantasy team. All right, well, that concludes the show. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Going to Me Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. You guys have a good weekend.